John Daversa Podcast.
When you look through a telescope and you start contemplating light years, and that what you're looking at is however many millions of years in getting here, and the idea of how these things are formed, and just all the different things that you can't barely wrap your mind around, you suddenly feel incredibly insignificant, but then you feel incredibly significant because you are somehow, you are given the consciousness to observe that and contemplate it, and a brain to do that. And that is so miraculous. So all of a sudden you become incredibly significant in the insignificance of it all. All of a sudden, how significant that I am here, singularly able to observe and learn from this. And it just becomes explosively inspiring. Birds do the same thing. You start thinking about birds and their ability to migrate, and the metamorphosis over, thousands and how many hundreds of thousands or, millions of years that animal or life it took to evolve, and how it evolved. That's like, and then what are we, just this blip in time, and we think this matters, how this microphone is set, or how that iPhone is there, or whether he's able to get the light between us, when we and controlling, what happens on a rehearsal or a concert or whatever. It's like, oh my God, it's really bizarre.
Maria Schneider. What do you say about Maria Schneider? She's a true master of her craft. And she's actually a NEA Jazz Master and a Multi-Grammy winner in multi-genres, and has been such an important advocate for musicians with her work with copyright, with U.S. Congress. And getting to sit down with her was such an honor and such a joy. And you'll find her to be so wonderfully honest and open and forthright and transparent, and I really enjoyed how her heart was in full display in this conversation. So, Maria Schneider, everybody.
I've just had such a year, It's unbelievable. But I mean, it's life stuff, you just have to kind of just, it's like every time I open my email, there's another email about mom and something that happened. And it's just like so stressful. The aging parent thing is,
Yeah.
I forget, your parents?
My parents are doing good.
How old?
They're 80. They're both
Oh, they're
right at
young.
that 80, yeah.
And you're how old?
I'm 50.
Yeah, so you're younger, and also my mom was older when she had me. But
see.
I have a lot of friends who are my age with parents much younger than my mom that have Alzheimer's and all sorts of, just a lot of stuff.
Well, I watched my folks take care of their folks, and they actually brought in all four into their house.
All four living
And
in their house?
They were caregiving for, almost a decade. And they really gave, that was their whole life.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's why they, part of why they stayed in Branson, Missouri.
Yeah.
Because they could, have a big house there and kind of have everybody there.
But that's that's the way it is in a lot of places. Like in Africa, I was just starting to read a book about aging from a man from India, and saying in India, they have this culture of taking care of your parents and living with them. And in Africa, there's a culture of really respecting older people as being, the wise, that you revere them. And in this country, it's like a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's almost opposite, right?
It really is the opposite. And, some of these caretakers have told me they have people that, they're with these people, parents all day long, And these people maybe come in once a month and don't even really want to touch their parent. It's just like they're sort of, well, hi, and then they just are uncomfortable and want to leave. And it's, it's but it is hard when you live someplace else and, you've got this life and obligations and trying to do it all. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, an American style is like, it's so individualistic,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like it's just fighting for yourself and,
It is.
in spite of everybody else, in spite of your family.
But I think all this stuff too, it reminds you of who you are and what's important, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah.
Make me cry.
Well, you know what I think about too, as I start to get older, as I start to understand more and more what that experience means. I start to understand what
it means to get older.
Yeah.
And what you've seen older people go through, that mentors and things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And even just things that I've experienced myself now that I know that I could not have known until I've actually gone through these decades.
Right.
And when you're 20, there's no way, just experience as a general term.
Yeah.
You never know anything until you experience it in the body, in the flesh, in this lifetime.
And then sometimes you don't understand it until you look back at it 30 years later. I'm going through that right now because I'm doing this. It's just funny you said the word decades. That's why I thought of it. An LP project. Have you ever put your music out on LP?
The last couple I've started doing that.
Oh, tell me, what did it feel like? Because I'm just stepping into it.
It's amazing. It's the thing, right, where you actually have the experience of opening up the album and there's a big picture, of inside, and you actually want to touch it and you want to read all the liner notes.
Yeah. And how about the sound just on vinyl? How did you feel? Because you sent in the masters, you know what they are digitally. Mm-hmm. And then when you heard the vinyl back, were you thinking, oh boy, this isn't so great? Or were you thinking this is amazing? Or what was your feeling about it? Different than you thought?
I mean, it was in the area of what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's a acoustic project, so having that analog warmth makes a lot of sense. I think if it were a different kind of music, maybe you really want something super clear and super clean.
Yeah.
But this just made it feel that much more human.
Yeah.
It was lovely.
Yeah, it's the hard part for me is the mastering, because I'm doing 3 LPs, one from each decade, because it's 30 years now since the band began. And so the albums from each decade are, I'm curating, deciding what's going to be on each album. And it makes you go back. It's like the Carlos Castaneda recapitulation or something. It's like you go back and you kind of re-experience the people and all these people that meant so much, and maybe you went your separate ways at some point, but that is just like this foundation, and you had so much together and the music developed. And then you realize that you as a musician, you're not just where you are now and your own work, but it's really the give and take that you've had with all these musicians over all these decades, and the ways in which you've changed, the influence that they've had on you, and for sure that you had on the people that you played with, and that were just, it's kind of powerful to look back and then to understand different things that your music went through, and maybe realizing why it was, forces you wouldn't recognize when you're in the moment.
I was going to ask you about this, actually. This exact thing, because I was working on a documentary, and it came up some of the old stuff that from with Justin and I, from 30 years ago, and you hear these things, and it's like listening to someone that you knew back then, but it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And so even looking back at the writing too, it's, so my question to you is going to be, how do you feel like you've evolved when you listen to music from prior iterations of yourself? What does that feel
Well,
like in a detached way, or can you even listen detached?
yeah, I mean, some things it's amazing because some things I look back at that at the time I completely berated myself for. And I look at it now and then I'm like, well, how did I write that? Like this one piece, Some Circles. That I remember the first time I heard it, I'm just like, that's just horrible and I can't write. And now, I want to put it on this thing, I mean, I listen to it and I'm like, wow, that's just really beautiful. There's maybe a couple odd choices in it, but there's things that I'd be happy writing now with it, so it's, and then one thing that I, have come to really discover is that my first music that I wrote for the band is very earnest and it's dark and it's dense for the most part. Nothing, Major Lydian, really. I mean, there's a few moments, but the essential color is, that it's more of a brooding kind of nature and intense and muscly and I remember when I first studied with Brookmeyer, that was kind of leading up to that period when I put out that first album. I said that I wanted to be able to write music with muscle. And he said, okay, we're going to talk about how to do that. Mainly it was a rhythmic thing that he talked to me about, the repetition of rhythm. And then just when the person thinks that rhythm is going to repeat again, changing it. So it's like, it's almost this, controlling the expectation of the music in a rhythmic kind of sense. But then he said, but the truth is, he said, I also, and then he talked about the female thing. There's been so many not female people in this profession. And if there is something that comes in your music that comes from that, God Almighty, it's time for it, And at the time, I didn't really know. I think it was more, generally forgetting about the gender thing, that generally a lot of jazz musicians feel that the music has to be serious to be serious. And then the game changer for me was, and I can see it very clearly in my albums, was when I went to Brazil. In 1997, my band went there and I heard choro music, and which means tear, but the music sounds joyful, and all this moving harmony that is beautiful and light and joyful. And my music just took such a turn because I was just like, wow, music can be deep and be beautiful and joyful. Not that my other music, I don't think it's beautiful, but I mean more of a light classic kind of sense of beauty, a brightness to it, brighter tones to it. And so my music took on that for a long time. And, and then, there's pivot points in your life. This is what I think you notice. In retrospect, you don't know what are the big defining moments in your life. But when I look at this stuff, there are pivot points. That's the first big pivot point was maybe my first commission was my first big commission was one pivot point where I went from writing music because I was writing it for myself to feeling the pressure of what other people want, which I've never really gotten used to. I always hated writing on commission. And then that next pivot point, that was like around 1994 or something. Next pivot point would be 1997, Brazil. And then a very powerful pivot point was when Clarence Penn came in my band as a drummer and left so much space in my music as a drummer that caused me to rethink how much space there could be in a big band. That was a biggie. And another one was the tough love of Bob Brookmeyer. When I did a clinic, let's see, at, do you remember Oh, it's in northern New York. I was just talking about it today with somebody, where the Olympics were.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, Lake Placid.
Oh,
You're too young, maybe.
no,
You
I remember Lake
you,
Placid.
You
yeah.
do? Okay, so did you ever go to the Lake Placid camp or anything?
No,
Well,
no.
they had
I was too West Coast.
Oh yeah. Well, they had like a big band camp,
Mm-hmm.
and Bob and I gave a clinic on the modality of this piece, Greenpeace, and Bob Brookmeyer was in the back, and he was like, "Do you think that first tenor solo is successful?" Oh, and it was this big free open solo. Then I said, "Oh, maybe not. I can tell by the way you're standing and talking that you think it's very unsuccessful." And so then he was saying to me, solos must always have the composer must keep their creative hand in there, steering where the solo went. So after that, I started really thinking about steering where the soloist goes. Until a few years later, my bands played live a lot. And all of a sudden, I realized the most fun pieces to play are the open solos where it can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, another pivot point. Now I'm back to the freedom because the band has matured. And the band now, they're thinking like writers, or we're thinking alike, and it's all about listening, and there's the space. So anyway, all of this basically is just making me see all these pivot points and how things transpired, and then you wonder what's going to come.
You know what that makes me think of? It's something actually I've observed of you, just getting to know you a little bit in these last few years. Is you have such an aware balance of control and surrender. Because I see you, and I hear it in the music. I see it in the music, and I see it in the way that you operate in dealing with in the lectures and preparing for whatever's coming up.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of preparation that you're always. We were talking about details before. Like you want to know what the details are. You want to make sure that your vision is understood by everybody.
Yeah.
As much as possible, and as much as possible, and as much as possible. But then when it's time for it to happen, you're completely open for anything to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have, it's difficult for them to be balanced in that way. It's difficult for them to let go of the control in the moment, or it's difficult for them to have the discipline to, or even the stay with itness to see their vision through.
Yeah, I think part of the control is in the planning stages, having the safety net there in case the freedom doesn't happen.
Right.
But certainly what I love the most, and I think I've become freer over the years just because of my band. It's like music changes you. Your life changes the music, but the music changes you as a person and how you think too. And just witnessing my bands, especially, this whole thing, Frank Kimbrough really was the biggest instigator of this risk-taking concept. Like I would come to him all panicked about this section or that. And, oh man, Maria, just let it. I said, we'll figure it out. Just let it happen. And sometimes I was like, you're so loose, but then, he would be right a lot of times, that. So I started to really, and that's maybe what I was talking about when the band, I started opening up solo sections and stuff, because I started to realize, because these guys have become, they've developed the art of listening as artists, appreciating space, being willing to not play, because they're enjoying what they're hearing and don't feel that they're there to add something. The ability for somebody to take risk because they know somebody's going to be there to save them. Scott Robinson can throw any note into the air and Frank Kimbrough's going to take it somewhere. Yeah. And those things have made me, and those have been the most joyful moments in my life. It's like doing a free fall, and then you're caught, and the experience is so exhilarating that I want that, and I want that in my life too. I'm also. Do you do any astrology stuff?
Yes, Sagittarius.
Oh, did we talk about this?
No. I saw your birthday.
You did?
Yeah.
And what are
you
you?
were talking about it the other day.
What are you?
I've got a lot of Libra, and then
you're
a lot,
so
and Leo as well.
Okay, so I don't know so much about it. I know a little bit about it. So I don't know. I presume you're balanced, but then you have a healthy show. Isn't a Leo kind of like the lion that's sort of
well, and it's
extrovert.
it's the playfulness, it's the creativity,
Yeah.
it's the why not, let's do this, and it's the loyalty, and it's the it's associated with children as well, the playfulness.
Oh, really? That's nice.
Yeah, but that's my the moon and Venus. So those are things that are very.
Those are great qualities to have. Well, Sagittarius can be kind of unwieldy, and I think they like burn the house down and see what happens. Kind of.
Yeah.
But then I have a whole bunch of planets in Capricorn, which is super taskmaster. So so what you recognize in me. Actually, it's funny. It's what a handful, less than a handful of astrologers, maybe 3 or something that I've talked to, in over the years. So it's not something I know much about, but it's something they said about me, that combination of the looseness and the freedom, but then the super, and sometimes when I let things go too far, all of a sudden it's like I clamp down on myself, like, no, be careful, which probably is what's allowed me to have the band, organize it, do all these things, because I have enough of that in me, assuming that there's anything to all of that at all.
It's all just polarities, right?
Yeah.
It's even the control and the surrender, right? It's you have to have the discipline, you have to have the vision and the method and the skill and the craft. You have to work on those things in order to bring anything into the physical. Well, and yet with the flowy part of it, the being able to be free and just pulling anything down in the moment and being present and spontaneous, that's when it just gets interesting.
And how about you with your parents? Because then, of course, you have, there's all these things that are in us sort of genetically and, maybe from the stars or whatever, but then just what your parents instilled in you, thinking about those things in you, because you have a similar thing. You're free, but maybe I'm probably got a little bit more of the Capricorn type thing in me than you do. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting what I'm understanding is that you feel like you're learning to be more open and more open to whatever may happen, right? To truly improvise and be present. I feel like in my earlier stuff, even in band directing and leading and writing, everything would be completely open, and I would have a very specific vision, but then people would come in and play it differently and be like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Just do that. And as I've gotten older, I'm starting to trust my own vision more and say, no, actually, we tried it that way, but actually I want it this way.
Okay.
I want it to be like this. And so it's becoming more and more in that direction.
And how about your parents? Do you think what kinds of qualities that have enabled you to be successful and be a creative person, but also to get things done? What qualities do you think your parents had or gave you besides being musicians,
Yeah, those are really interesting things to go into. I think, with my parents, number one, it's not a direct answer, but they gave me a lot of love and a lot of support. So they gave me that foundation of whatever you want to do, go for it. You can't fail.
Yeah.
And also, they showed me that there's a value in art and in creativity, and told me that I was good at it, enough so that I felt like, yeah, okay, I can do this. And what I saw from them, certainly from, my dad was a trumpet player as well, right? So he fell in love with that instrument when he was 4.5 and, played every morning before he went to school. So there's a certain example there of the discipline that it takes to develop a craft. And also he's very creative, but I think even the openness comes from my mom, who is just ready for anything to happen at any time, at any moment, and like a butterfly. Well, this is cool over here. Let's go over here. Well, let's go over here.
Wow.
So I think I was able to see some great examples in both.
Yeah.
And it's funny, those examples can be seen as archetypal feminine and masculine too. That the method, the discipline, the climb, the mountain is not man but masculine. They're like that's the grid. It's I always think about the wall and the paint. Like the wall is there, the structure is there, and it's just there, and it's sturdy and it holds space, but it's not necessarily all that artful.
Yeah.
And then, and if the wall wasn't there, you could throw the paint up and the paint would just go and it would be lovely and it would just go, but no one would ever see it as a piece.
Yeah.
And so when the paint goes on the wall, that's when we get to appreciate it and it comes together.
Yeah. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
I
So
like that.
So I think I got those pieces from them in that way.
Wow.
Yeah. But I see that in you so clearly in the music and how you're able to ground in both of those and kind of navigate.
Yeah.
In the way that you talk to people, in the way that you present the master classes, in the way that your music comes out.
I think for me, I only do things that I want to do and that I love. And I've always followed, thank goodness, whatever it was in me, I was never able to do anything other than that. I think some people feel compelled by the I should voice. And my gut, I'm such an emotional person that if something just starts feeling wrong to me, I can't deny it. It's the same thing with the music. I was talking to people about writing music. Like some people say, how do you know something's done? And it's like when my stomach quits hurting about it, because I care about it so much and I'm just miserable. And then all of a sudden I'm not miserable anymore. And I'm like, okay, I guess I finished, and I forgot even what you were talking about that made me say that. But anyway.
I remember I saw a masterclass that you gave, and someone asked you that same question. How do you know when you finished a piece? And you said something to that effect, but you also added, when I wake up in the morning and I'm not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah, that's true, because it'll be in your dreams at night and everything, like, oh my God, what comes next, or that ending, or that transition, and it just eats at you.
Yeah.
It just eats at you. But I know the point was that quality in me never allowed me to do things I didn't like because I physically couldn't live with it. That I just, I couldn't go every day to a job that I didn't at least feel good about my work in some way, or what it was contributing, or the quality of it, or something like that. So,
but that's such a gift that you're incapable of ignoring that.
Yeah.
Because I think other folks, that's going on, but they're able to, for better or for worse,
stuff it.
Yeah, and just ignore it, or not even be aware of kind of what it is, just not understand what it is.
I think so many people, young people, they don't know what it is that they want to do or what they love. And I think I look back and I still realize there's things I could have done in college. If I'd been smarter, I think I'm fairly smart, but, like that crazy smart, I probably would have ditched music for physics and astronomy.
Really?
Yeah, because I was really kind of struggling. I went in as I went in as a theory major at the University of Minnesota, and then classical. And at the time it was very, classical music was very atonal, and there wasn't much room, at least where I was at the moment, for tonality. And I loved tonality.
Muscular tonality.
What's that?
Muscular tonality.
Yeah, muscular. Well, I got muscular, but yeah. And so I was thinking maybe this just isn't for me because and then I got deeper and deeper into the jazz world. There was a big band at the school, and I started writing for that and discovering the joy of, all of this that I never stopped doing. But I had been taking an astronomy class, and I loved it so much, and I loved what it did to me. And it's the same thing, birds. I hadn't really, when I was little, I thought about becoming an ornithologist. But then in later years, in high school, I didn't have the best biology. If I'd had really good biology, a teacher that really inspired me, I might have gone that route, because I really loved birds and I could imagine that. But I don't know. I think there's so many things I could have done and loved, and sometimes I look back and I love those kind of things. The reason I love birding and astronomy is, I was talking to Luciana about this because Luciana's here this week.
Luciana Souza.
Yeah. When you look through a telescope and you start contemplating light years, and that what you're looking at is however many millions of years in getting here, and the idea of how these things are formed, and just all the different things that you can't barely wrap your mind around, you suddenly feel incredibly insignificant, but then you feel incredibly significant because you are somehow, you are given the consciousness to observe that and contemplate it, and a brain to do that. And that is so miraculous. So all of a sudden you become incredibly significant in the insignificance of it all. All of a sudden, how significant that I am here, singularly able to observe and learn from this. And it just becomes explosively inspiring. Birds do the same thing. You start thinking about birds and their ability to migrate, and the metamorphosis over, thousands and how many hundreds of thousands or, millions of years that animal or life it took to evolve, and how it evolved. That's like, and then what are we, just this blip in time, and we think this matters, how this microphone is set, or how that iPhone is there, or whether he's able to get the light between us, when we and controlling, what happens on a rehearsal or a concert or whatever. It's like, oh my God, it's really bizarre.
It's awesome. It's a marvelously curious thing, right?
Yeah.
And just thinking about astronomy and physics, and like I was even thinking, whatever field you went into, it doesn't matter, right? Because it's really about the experience of it. Like, what have you come into this life to experience? And I think that's the gift to yourself, that consciousness to observe, to witness, and also experience, both of it together. And if we think of like all these individual humans as little pods of neurons that go, as above, so below, right? It's that same principle.
Yeah.
And so we're all one, but we get to have this illusion that we're separate, so that we can observe the other and have the experience of what it feels like to be in this body, and have the experience of the pain, and have the experience of everything that we manifest for our lives, which seemingly is a challenge, which is actually the greatest gift.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's crazy.
Like Luciana was saying too, the other day, she was talking about, I forget, I think she was talking about samba, and how, the subject material, the lyrics can be of pain, it can be of anger, it can be of joy, it can be of love, it can be of loss, but it always sounds happy. So why is that? And that's because, it's the community. And I never thought about that before, because they're sharing the human experience together, may it be of pain or joy. And that's why it's ultimately of joy.
Yeah. I always say that my favorite music is music that's like alchemy, where it turns pain into beauty and joy. And a lot of music is like that. I mean, flamenco doesn't sound particularly joyful, but it's beautiful, and it's so it turns all that pain to beauty, and yeah, and so many things in life are like that, storytelling too, or a movie or whatever. Conflicted people that are conflicted, but somehow something, they come together, and in that togetherness, somehow you find this beautiful aspect from the pain through the giving of another person or whatever that is. And
It's almost like you get to see yourself through this other mirror.
yeah, maybe. So let me ask you something. In teaching, because you're sensitive to these issues in a way that not every teacher probably is. So how do you teach somebody to become, or help them find a greatness in musicianship when they're struggling between the doing it for themselves, but then in school suddenly comparing yourself to everybody, and you're being judged, graded, realizing your livelihood is going to depend on how you are accepted or perceived by a paying public. And how does somebody keep, and it's important to think about those things, because that is also that discerning and thinking about is what helps you develop your craft. But along the way, you can completely destroy the thing that's the light in the music that gives it something to communicate.
Yeah.
How do you help a musician keep that alive? And let's just say, especially a musician where you realize they really do have deep technical problems and things to work hard on.
Yeah, and every individual is a different case. There are some folks that are really, talking about, again, like that method versus intuition thing. Some people are really in tune with the intuition, and they can just be free and dance a certain way, and they don't have to think about the craft, but they only go to a certain place with it, right? Because they don't have the vocabulary to use.
Or the discipline to develop more than what they were God-given,
right.
or whatever you want to call it.
So it's kind of pointing out where they are. Okay, so you need vocabulary. You need to figure out how to spell watermelon, how to spell a watermelon backwards, how to, spell, take all those letters and rearrange them and write them upside down, learn them in all the other languages. And when you can do that, and you do it for 15 minutes every day at the same time, and all of a sudden you reach a new plateau because the intuition can meet the craft.
Right.
And you might even overshoot that a little bit. It's like the step ladder, right? And then all of a sudden the method is stronger than your awareness of your intuition. Then you have to go back in and go back into the heart, and then do practice. There are practices for that too, right? And then you bring that up, and then it just keeps on going up.
Do you explain that to your students?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes it has to be on an individual basis. You got to kind of grab somebody in the hall and say, hey, here, I kind of saw this going on. You ever think about this? And sometimes it's practically do this and see what happens. Come back to me in 5 days and see what happens when you do this 10 minutes every day.
Yeah.
And it always has to be the discipline has to be something where you can deliver on it. The discipline.
Yeah.
So it's take something where you can actually commit to it. I'm going to do this for this rhythmic exercise, 2 minutes with the metronome at 8 o'clock until 8:02 every day for 5 days. And then when you do it, then that gives you the confidence to go to the next level of it. And even the discipline to practice the heart-based intuitive practices as well. But say in my grad comp class that you're going to come in tomorrow, I try to give them assignments where some of them some of the assignments are really working on craft, and other ones where it's like, this is a concept, and there's absolutely no wrong way to do this. I just want you to get to write. I want you to come up with something in a way that you normally would never do it.
Yeah.
So that you can download and really think about it as a download that has nothing to do with you. And by the way, even that judgment of comparing yourself to other people, like when that download comes in, whatever that melody is, that voicing is, that gives you, there's a reason why it came down. There's no reason to judge it at that point because it's not even yours.
Yeah.
Like, who are you to judge it yet?
Yeah.
It's your responsibility to take everything that you've accumulated in terms of skill and intuition and then birth it. It's just a responsibility. It has nothing to do with you. So take the ego out of it.
It's funny. Ivan Lintz, years ago, I worked with him and arranged music for him and stuff. And when he first came over to my apartment, and he was in New York, and he was playing through his songs, and and I'd listened to just endless songs by him. So I'd say, well, how about maybe Lembra Jamim, and yes, and then he'd play it, Lembra Jamim, da 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 da, and then after that, it's be like, well, okay, I was also thinking about Louis Soberana. Oh, I love that one. And then he'd play it, and these were all his songs. And then and I was just loving his songs so much. And at a certain point, he said, he laughed and he said, I can say this because I don't really feel like any of them are mine. And it was that, and I feel that actually this came up today in a class I taught, looking back at your music and do you judge it? And part of it is I feel like I look back and they feel like my children that went off to college or something, and they're no longer. Parents must look at some point at their kids like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Who is that person? I didn't make that person. Who did they become?
Yeah.
And I feel that sometimes about my pieces, even though I know I worked incredibly hard on them, and every parent labors with their child to get them through this phase or that phase. But then in the end, they become their own. And I feel that about my pieces. They are like, kids. And so I do love them in the way that Ivan for sure loves his songs,
I relate to that in the exact same way. I hear the older pieces, and there's so many things that I would do differently, of course, but it's not mine anymore. It's like it lives in that time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even write like that anymore either, because it's just a different time. And I even think, the analogy of having children, I know when my daughter was born, the moment I saw her eyes, I saw exactly who she was.
Wow.
Exactly. That person, that soul is there. And I've just seen her expand.
Wow.
I have nothing to do with it. It's just guiding.
Yeah.
It's just, making sure that she has everything that she needs.
Being there with love.
And it's just, and she just expands into this, more and more, adult person every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Of course, I wonder what a parent says when their child develops into like a serial killer or something. It's supposed to be like, okay, I had nothing to do with that.
Right. I know.
I wonder if they ever say, I looked in their eyes when they were born and I knew there was something strange there. Maybe.
I bet. Actually.
Maybe.
Yeah. Or not that it has to be negative or positive either.
Yeah,
Maybe there's something in their eyes where there's there's a special thing, and then it can go either way.
Yeah.
But there's a,
something. Yeah. I took a dark turn there. I'm sorry.
No, that's really interesting. Let me ask you this. You were talking. I actually saw. I don't know where or when, but I remember seeing an interview with you, and you were talking about David Bowie, and you mentioned that you kind of had a vision that you were going to work with him at a certain point.
No, that was Gil.
Oh, with Gil.
That's Gil.
With Gil.
Bowie, I never had even the faintest idea. When that came, it was like, what? Except that he had come to a concert of mine, and I knew that even though I didn't meet him. But Anyway, yeah, Gil. That
No,
was
but
Gil.
with, and I was curious if there were other things that you kind of saw in your head over your life or career where that came true. I mean, it could be something small like, performing at a certain place or having the band or, you know,
Two things that were kind of tragic, honestly. One was a friend of mine. Actually, I wrote a piece for her when she died called Last Season. And she was a girl I knew in high school. I mean, I've had 3 things where I saw it happen and then it happened that were just so eerie to me. So this one was, I was sitting with my friends around a table in Wyndham, and all of a sudden it was like somebody just told me she had cancer. It was so weird, and I was thinking, well, not her. I mean, she was super athletic, beautiful, beautiful girl, had won like state track meets and in track and field, in hurdles. She was unbelievable. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I was like, that was a weird thought. Why did that come in my head? And then I put it away. And like a week later, a friend of mine called me in college and said, did you hear about Mary Elston? And I said, no. And she has cancer. And it was just like, oh my God. And it just completely flipped me out, that like, how did I see that, And then my piano teacher growing up, her name was Evelyn Butler, and it happened not that long after it. So I actually got a little freaked out by this, I have to say. And thankfully it didn't happen again until the Gil Evans thing, and it hasn't happened much after that I can really recall at all. Thank goodness. But that one was my piano teacher. She was old, and a friend of mine said, oh, she's going to be coming to Minneapolis. She's going to be at this party. And Mrs. Butler was just this fabulous pianist, stride, classical, just magnificent. And so I was so excited she was going to come to Minneapolis. But then I had this dream and I don't recall exactly what the dream was, but that something really bad was going to happen to her. And I actually told my sister about it. And I said, I don't know about her coming, and she came. And that night I went to the party and she was there. And all of a sudden we heard her calling, and she was calling Maria. And I don't know if it was me or the mother of my friend whose name was also Maria. Maria. And I went, and she had fallen and both her hands were broke. I mean, you could just see they were like 90-degree angles, It was just horrible. And I was just horrified, and it was just like, God, intuition, But then the crazy intuition that came was with Gil. That was a good one. Thank God. And that was...
So what do you do with that? With those
panic about yourself. want to run from myself. I remember my sister that night, she said, don't tell me what you're thinking about me. Don't tell me. Because she knew this, because I told, and she was like scared of me. And I was scared of myself. I wanted to jump out of my skin. I didn't want that. It was very weird. And I'm really glad I don't have that anymore, because I don't want that, because they were both two very dark things. And bizarrely, the thing with Mrs. Butler, she had a friend in Wyndham that had been having bad dreams. And she had actually, I think, told her not to go, that she didn't have a good feeling about it. So, who knows what energy some people are even putting out. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it's the energy that they're putting out, in some kind of way, transmitting, and other people get it. But with Gil, it was just, I was just listening to the Svengali album and looking at the picture of him on the Priestess album with the umbrella falling, and he was looking so old. And I was just, listening to the music. The room was pretty dark, and just bathing myself in ZZ or something like that. And just kind of saw myself, just sort of being like an apprentice for him, sort of. And it was sort of just it was just a vision that just passed by. It wasn't like, gee, that would be amazing. I wish I could contact him. If only I knew. I wonder if. It was nothing like that. It was like a wafting little movie that comes by. And I think a lot of times I was telling some people about this, that when you have those kind of visions, it's really important to maybe trust them, because I think my love of that music was so intense that the feeling I had later, and I met him totally by accident, is that you cast out almost like an energy line.
Yeah.
And it's there. And, whether the other party takes it or not is, but I don't know what it's about. There's something there. But yeah, years later, I was just working as a music copyist in an office. I did that my first 8 years in New York. 8 years of music copying, studying with Brookmeyer, working for Gil Evans, but that came in a moment, I'll say. But yeah, but just making money, But I wanted to write the music I wanted to write. I had been signed on by a commercial guy. This guy, Charles Yaski, and I put together like a jingle reel. It was really good. If I played you that music, you'd be like, damn, that's good. I mean, I listened to it now, I'm like, holy crap. I did it right out of Eastman, just these 3 short little jingles, but they were beautiful.
You should put it on your retrospective with the band. Bonus
Oh,
tracks.
yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe that's a good thing, just to put like extra artist share content, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, yeah, maybe I will do that. There was like a fake Kodak commercial, fake Seiko watches, and a fake Norwest Bank. Anyway, and I got signed on immediately. But then it's like, that was that era where immediately everybody was getting their home studios and everything was MIDI. And of course it is now, But, and I was just thinking, I was ready to make the big investment, and then I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. That doesn't light me up. It was following that gut feeling again. It was just kind of, and I thought I would just rather be a waitress and, write what I want to write. And I know I'm never going to make any money on it. I remember that man, actually, Charles Yaski, I remember him saying when I said I wanted to start a big band, you're never going to make any money doing that. I mean, my whole living comes, thank God, from having that big band. Is the big band a moneymaker? No, but it telegraphed out what I do and my joy and love of doing it.
Yes. From
which everything came from, So
that's the important takeaway right there.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, when you do what you love, it telegraphs. And just the Gil thing, what happened was I was in that office Xeroxing music, and this guy, Tom Pearson, I don't know if you remember who that was.
No, I don't.
He lives in Japan, and he had a band in New York, and he was always very much struggling, financially with that band. And I remember watching that thinking, now maybe I don't want to do this because it does look like hard work. But he was, and he would always pay everybody and divvy it up. If it was an extra 38 cents, he'd divvy it up that he was so fair. But I didn't know him at the time anyway. I Xeroxed a score. And then, we were leaving together. We got lunch. I can't remember. We were walking out the door. I was getting lunch. And so we got talking about music and who we loved, and I was going on and on about Gil Evans. And then he called me that night, and he said, well, I didn't tell you, but Gil is like my closest friend. And I called him and told him about you, and he wants to meet you. He needs somebody to assist him. And that's how it started. I mean, I remember when that happened, all of a sudden it was that moment with the ZZ album that I hadn't thought about since it happened. All of a sudden it was like, and I saw it, and it was like, now I'm here, and it's like, how did that? Wow,
It's just a divine alignment.
Some crazy thing in life, It's bizarre. Years later, after Gil died, his wife Anita said to me that he would call her sometimes after I would leave, because they didn't live together, but they were still close, and he would say, oh, Maria looks so much like Mom. She reminds me so much of Mom. And it's so weird because he never said that to me. Yeah. Maybe he thought that would weird me out.
Probably. Yeah, that's another thing that's so incredible, isn't it? It's like almost in the realm of that word magic, how we come into each other's lives.
Yeah.
And those connections are just so, you're like, I was talking to Justin Morel yesterday. He's one of these people for me.
I love his music. That project you guys did. Oh, that was one of those projects that went right to my heart. I was like, this is such important music, both of you. And I knew nothing about your relationship with each other. Keep your thought. Just going to say this, but it felt, and I knew nothing about him. I never met him, and I actually had never heard of him. And I didn't know that much about you at the time. Or maybe I did. Was I already here? Maybe I did. I don't know. But I was just like, holy crap, this is so good. This is so beautiful.
And that's what meant so much to us, to have your endorsement and support on the project as well, because we know how much how sincere that was.
Yeah, it really was. Anyway, so Justin, you
well,
were saying-
I was just, we hadn't talked for a while, and we were working on this little project together, and I only have to say, I struggle with articulating and expressing, and
doesn't seem so, but okay.
Yeah, it's, and I have to say, I can say the thing over there, and he knows exactly what I what I want to do. It's just that connection is there, but it's in some other dimension, and there's so many other people in my experience that come into my life, and they're in there for a time, and they kind of serve that moment in a really magical way, and then the time goes away, and it leaves space for this other thing to happen, and it really makes me feel like this life is like this magical dream, and you just wake up every morning and it's like, what's going to happen today?
Yeah, it's funny, that piece that I was talking about earlier. That I said there was a piece that I think I said. Did I say there was a piece that I look back and wonder how I did it or something? Yeah, it was called Some Circles, based on a Kandinsky painting, but I thought of it exactly that way. There's these circles that come over sort of a black background, and they intersect, and different colors, not necessarily the exact color that would happen if you put like blue and yellow together or something like that, but they're different sizes, and they intersect in different ways. And I saw it exactly like that, like like people, how we float in and we come in and out of lives and change each other, and then go, and then somebody else comes, and a piece of you that went in that person now goes and connects with that person, and how we are just so connected.
What
It's
a beautiful
amazing.
thought.
Yeah, it's pretty. Well, the world is a crazy and magical place, and you wonder, like, what does it all mean, and what happens when you go, like, what's next? Yeah. It must be something wild. I
think it's all happening at the same time,
Well, that's what. So Gil told me that in a dream.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gil came to me in a dream one night, and, I was raised Catholic, so I always thought that you either go to heaven or hell, or maybe there's just nothing. And at the time I had this dream, I hadn't read anything about sort of mysticism or Buddhism or anything. The closest I came is when I was a little girl. I remember I asked my mom, and I was really young, what happens when you die? And she said, well, some people think that you go to heaven. Some people think there's nothing. Some people think that you could come back as a flower or as another person. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. There's too many choices here. It's like, well, tell me, is it A, B, C, or D? But it was pretty cool that she did that. But, but I basically grew up thinking, not really reading much about it. It was the one time I sort of inquired about it. And then I started losing so many people that were so important to me. And Gil was one of those people, and people that I just revered and went to hear all the time, like Mel Lewis and my teacher Rayburn Wright from Eastman, and and the Mrs. Butler, and all these people. And so one night I was about to wake up, and I was in a dream, but all of a sudden I was like aware of my dream. I was like in a waking dream kind of, and Gil was there sideways, glowing golden, and it was like he was like a hologram. And he didn't talk, but what he said came to me in words. It was like emanating thoughts, and it was very specific what I got. And he said, Maria, so I saw him and I said, what's it like to be dead? And he said, you think that when you die, you go far away or that there's nothing. But I exist in the inverse of your reality. I'm where you are, turned inside out. And I could feel this dimensional, like there was this multi-dimensional space, and that it was intersected, and it was right here. And in then the next part's hazy, but I think it was kind of like, just like I'm working and growing, he's there and he's in that space, and and then I woke up and I was like so ecstatic because I could feel it, and
Right.
I was.
It was
And
visceral, right? No.
what's that?
It was visceral,
Oh,
right?
it was incredible. The joy of that was unbelievable. And so a couple of days later, I was debating, do I call Anita and tell her, his wife, or is that weird? Like Gil came to me in a dream. Like, what if she's like, well, he didn't come to me in a dream, or something, And then I was just like, okay, I just have to tell her. So I called her and I said, so I told her what happened. And she said, that I go to somebody who channels Jocko, and he calls it the flip side of the coin. So how are you doing? And then that was the call when she told me that Gil used to say I looked like his mother, Anyway, out there stuff. But yeah, it's like, what is the nature? But I will say years later, when I went through a cancer experience, my fear of death, at that time, I thought I transcended beyond fear of death. But when I found out I was sick, I had just an absolutely gripping, terrifying fear of death. It was unbelievable. I was sad that it didn't sustain me. I let the fear completely take over. So that's one thing I came to learn, is that we can think that we've evolved so much, but when life tests you, you find out really, what's going on. And it was a real lesson about, we just don't entirely know ourselves always as much as we think we do. And life puts you through things, and then you learn new things about yourself, and there's a lot to learn. Whew.
I got a test like that this year.
You did.
Yeah, I did. I don't know what was going on with me, but I'm pretty sure I had some sort of pneumonia at a certain point. I got really run down.
Yeah.
And pushed myself, and then after that I pushed myself a little bit further, and then it aggravated some asthma.
Oh, wow.
For me, as intense as I used to have asthma when I was a kid, but
Wow.
it was really, really intense.
Wow.
And there was a night, there were a couple nights, but there was a night, like just 3:00 in the morning, where, breathing is an involuntary thing.
Yeah.
And it actually got to the point, to the fatigue level of just, I could only breathe in this
Tiny.
really minuscule little area. And it came to the point where, with the fatigue and everything, I had to actually consciously breathe. I'm gonna inhale now, and I'm gonna exhale. And so in that consciousness, I had to decide to live.
Really?
It was, it's hard to know.
Because you realized you could just let go right there.
I could have.
Wow.
Could have. And the only thing.
Were you scared?
I wasn't. I with my understanding of, whatever this existence is, it's just another dimension from other existences, and so
Yeah. So you were secure in that. See,
that was
even though
okay.
Gil gave me that experience, but it didn't. I guess I didn't absorb it quite enough. I need to work on that.
No, that's why we keep getting these tests,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like, okay, there's that.
Yeah.
But the thing that came to my mind was, okay, I have a 12-year-old daughter. I still need to be here for her. That was it.
Wow.
I'm still to be here for that.
Wow.
And and then over time, I got better, but
Wow.
that was wild.
Wow.
It's really wild to actually make the decision to stay.
Wow.
You know?
And did you go to the hospital that night?
Nope. The next day, I started to feel a little bit better, and then things started to just slowly open up, and
it wasn't
and it was
COVID
okay.
related.
Nope.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy,
But those challenges really, like we were saying, you get to see the mirror back and see who you are and where you are.
Did it feel like a panicky feeling physically to not be able to breathe?
I had to use all the work that I've done in meditation and
To not completely freak out, right?
because there's an anxiety. I can't breathe, and what am I going to do? And I had to go and be still.
Yeah.
And, the mind had to be still to understand what was happening at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, kudos.
So,
You passed a test, a life test.
They're all experiences.
Yeah.
To be that is the gift, as what I'm understanding, like that the experience itself is the gift to ourselves and also to the collective.
Yeah.
To experience ourselves through that way, and through music and all of these scary things.
Yeah.
The panic of even meeting a hero, the panic of putting a piece of music in front of a band that you feel insecure about, or trying new things. Or
do you ever get panicked about that, or nervous?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have those insecure moments, like I don't know if it's going to work or not. At this point, it's lessened a lot because if it fails, it failed. Okay. I don't put my stock into who I am in it. If it does fail, it's okay. I mean, I think it also goes in, like I improvise all the time, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it's the exploration.
You just let it go. Well, that came and went. Yeah, that was my biggest lesson with Bowie that he gave me, was because I was so nervous about this thing that we were going to record, and if it would be good, and if he'd like it, or if it was just going to be really weird. Or
what was it, Sue or something else?
Sue,
okay,
the big band version of Sue. And he said, "Oh, Maria, the great thing about music is if the plane goes down, we all walk away." and he just laughed, and he said, if it's not good, he said, we won't put it out. I wouldn't do that to you, and I wouldn't do that to me. So I was like, whatever.
That's great.
Yeah, it was.
I love that.
And it did help me, and it does help me think about, what's the worst,
Yeah.
What's the worst if the plane goes down, whatever,
Yeah. I say that all the time as a joking. What's the worst that could happen? We'll die?
Yeah.
It's all right. Maria, thank you so much for being so open and
nice to talk with you.
for sharing this time with me and whoever's going to align with listening to this.
Thank you.
And it's so great to get to sit down with you and talk about
you too.
These amazing magical things.
Yeah.
So we'll keep doing it. Keep making music too, huh?
Well, I will. I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Much gratitude, everyone, for checking out the podcast. Please just subscribe and follow and like and add a comment, as it really helps us expand and grow and keep us all connected together. So I appreciate it very much, and I send you much, much, much love. I'll see you on the next one.